get started. So thank you to everybody here. Grab brownies, cookies, coffee, show them to everybody online. Everybody online, thank you for joining us today. The CTS has funded throughout the last many years projects to help improve transportation safety in Texas. So Robert had a whole series of projects. We funded projects this year to continue that, and that'll continue in the future. What we're trying to do is to get the results of those projects disseminated to stakeholders like y'all here in the room, online, and then the idea is to eventually populate our website, the CTS website, with a lot of this information as well. So we're really trying to take a stance of getting this information out to everybody in the research, education, and outreach community. So this is really kind of the first step in that direction. So a list of the speakers today is Ioannis. I'll introduce him in just a second, but you can see we have Min Lee in April talking about advanced techniques to data mine pedestrian crash data, not cache data. And then Young has volunteered for June to talk about some of the VR work that he's been doing. Srinivas is in August. October is Katie, really fortunate. And then December, Melissa. And we've only stopped at December because that's where the planning ends, but we've had a lot of people express interest in doing these. So we have at least another year's worth of, easily a year's worth of other presentations. We may not continue every other month. We'll see how well that goes. But we really do like the idea of getting this information out. Okay. So today, I want to introduce Dr. Ioannis Pavlidis. He's at the University of Houston. The web address is down below. He's the director of the Computational Physiology Lab. I met Ioannis when I first came to TTI, 10 years ago, and Robert had a project with Toyota where we were looking at stress detection, physiological responses to emergency event scenarios. You can remember many years ago, Toyota, there was this thought that there was this unintended acceleration problem with Toyotas where they would suddenly accelerate. And part of the problem appeared to be the carpeting getting stuck underneath the accelerator pedal and all that. But our project, which was headed by Robert and Ioannis, was meant to look at how drivers respond to that. And one component of that was their physiological response. Okay. And this project that Ioannis has been doing in the last couple of years for CTS has really built on that and expanded that research significantly. So we did some really remarkable things with the Toyota work. In fact, there was a publication that was published in Scientific Reports, which is an offshoot of the Journal of Nature. And it's like a really high ranking article. I mean, it's awesome. And Ioannis is directly responsible for making that happen. Okay, next slide. I do want to point out something that's really important to me. Ioannis did his PhD and master's at the University of Minnesota. Go Goalie Gophers.
Yes.
That's our mascot right there, right? Everything else is this asterisk, which is relatively minor compared to his time at Minnesota. I will just say that I am an alumni. I did my PhD here as well. Ioannis graduated in '96 with his PhD, and I finished in '97. I didn't know him at all, although we probably did talk to each other at some point because I knew his advisor quite well. So anyway, so today I've asked Ioannis to come and talk about the project that CTS has been funding for the last few years. There's potentially a lot of material here. I know Ioannis we have about an hour together. The idea is that this research is going to be split up into a series of research articles that we're going to submit for publication. So while he may not get through everything today, there is a lot of material here. My last comment is, as you kind of look at the presentation today and hear what Ioannis has to say about the research, think about how this work might be used by you or others, or how, if you have a project, if adding this component, like a stress detection component, might facilitate your work. Again, we go back to a lot of the things that we talked about during CTS Day, collaboration, reaching out and making those linkages and taking advantage of it. And here's like a perfect example how we've done that in the past between Ioannis's lab in Houston, our work here at TTI, both on the Toyota project and this. But think about how this work might help to support your work and make your effort more successful. So that's my parting comment. Okay. Thank you, Ioannis. Go first, one last time. So
of course. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank very much Mike for his invitation and his kind words. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me switch presentations. All right, and I hope everybody sees my screen. If not, please let me know. And of course, here's my voice. So as Mike mentioned, I will present work that has been going on for the last couple of years. It's collaborative work between my group and Mike's group here at TTI. And of course, it has been largely funded also by TTI. If I were to give a title to this line of work is Universal Monitoring of Driving Risk via Physiology. There are various methods of estimating driving risk, but doing this via physiology is not the usual method, and you will see how we arrived at this breakthrough of sorts. So with that, let me get started. As I was working in this project the last couple of years, one of the things that I came to visit again and again is automobility risk and its consequences. And in the course of that, I changed my views about a bunch of things. One of which was the concept that the biggest killer in human history was the Second World War, with about 66 million people killed. That's an estimate. And I found out that when it comes to automobility, since 1896, when the first death was recorded from a car crash, until now, 85 million people killed worldwide. And again, this is an estimate, probably conservative. So automobility during its 100 plus years of existence killed a lot of people. And does it get any better if you see the numbers? It does not. Because almost 20 million plus people were killed just at 20 last year. So the problem in absolute numbers is not getting better, it's getting worse, actually. Of course, that has to do also with the fact that automobility has spread throughout the world. One way or the other, however, we need a new approach, because obviously there is a problem here, and despite our best efforts in terms of technology improvements, regulations, this and that, let's say that things are not getting better and probably are getting worse. So with this context in mind, you have to view what I will present next, which is an effort to have a deeper understanding of the automobility problem first, and then based on this deeper understanding, try to find a more effective solution and reduce those horrible statistics that I presented a minute. So this R&D effort had two legs. One was a naturalistic study, and the other was a large-scale survey. And that's why we call this a twin study effort, because those two things were going in parallel. Why did we choose this approach? The initial reason was that in naturalistic studies, if the naturalistic study is comprehensive, we get a lot of data from sensors. That's what naturalistic studies are all about. But if you want to be thorough, you need also to get data about the subjects themselves, information about their psychometric properties, their biographic characteristics, and so on. And this is where the problem is. Going with sensors, get millions of points every day if you monitor a 24/7 cycle, because these sensors record on a second level basis. Of course, when it comes to psychometric properties and biographic characteristics and all that, these are typically single values for every human being. So you have a data disparity test. You have millions of points on the sensor side, then you have only a handful of points on the human side. I mean the trait human side, if you like. So how can you bridge this gap? You have two ways. One is to run massive naturalistic studies, for which you need a lot of money. And the other way, which is for the first time I propose here, is to run moderate size studies or even small naturalistic studies and make up this gap by running very large surveys at a broader population that captures the data for which you have a deficit. And that basically will help you in two ways. First, you will be able to verify what you are finding at the smaller naturalistic sample, and second, allow you perhaps to project how things will evolve with respect to the data that you are not very rich of. Now, so as we move through this presentation, you also need to be aware of the underlying theory that we were pinning our hopes against, and that theory is the Yerkes-Dodson law. So, what is the Yerkes-Dodson law for familiar? It's basically a theoretical principle that was established in the early 20th century that arousal relates to performance according to the graph that you see here on our screen. A very low arousal, which obviously does not help performance in whatever task you perform, and that includes driving, of course. On the other hand, hyperarousal, say the condition of being very upset or under a lot of stress, that does not help us post performance, whatever the task may be, certainly driving on them. And there is a sweet spot in the middle where your arousal, that is your psychophysiological is optimal. And when this is the case, depending on context, of course, you perform very well in whatever task you are driving is one process. So the ultimate goal is to study basically to establish link between the arousal state of drivers and their performance. And when we're talking about driver performance, this is also associated with risk. Risk is the inverse of good performance here, of course, and you will see how we proceed along this. But the point is, if we are able to properly estimate arousal and link it with performance, which is inverse risk, and we do this instantaneously, one time, like we, every time, every moment of every day for every human being. Then basically we may have something may go back and revisit your own. Okay, and of course, arousal is measured in several ways. Physiology is probably the best way to measure arousal, like a physiological state of a human. And one of the indicators that may help you estimate arousal is heart rate. Heart rate by itself is not arousal, but you can use heart rate to estimate arousal. Why I'm saying this is because there is a lot of inter-individual variability when it comes to all this physiological. Falls under this premise. So you need to know also the baseline, so that based on this baseline, you can factor in maybe you approximate arousal in business, so to speak. And this baseline, again, is not one number for one person. Your baseline varies every day. And if you guys have smartwatches, you do like especially Apple Watches, when you look at your estimate every day, you will see a little bit. So you need to know all this in order basically to estimate arousal. Thankfully, thanks to smartwatches, we can figure all these things out in a ubiquitous manner. And the bonus here is, as we are looking towards transportation safety and driving risk and so forth, through the arousal lab, because we estimate arousal through a physiological indicator, in this case, normalized heart rate. We also need to bear in mind the cardiovascular indicator, the irregular health. So you have a bonus, but at the same time, with one you can hit two bars. The transportation safety issue as well as the health market. All right. Now, twin studies. I said the large-scale survey. Let's visit this. By the way, the same survey we gave it to the people who participated in the naturalistic study. The same survey we also gave it to a very large sample from the state of Texas. Mike's wonderful work. They reached out to 1,220 Texans who completed this survey, and this is where we now, we call this a comprehensive driving survey, and the reason is that we try to cover a lot of angles in this survey, and some of these angles are standard, while others, as you can see, are so what did we try to cover with the survey? Again, you have to go back to the theoretical underpinning of the study, and people actually may be asking me questions through the peers, but anyway, so right. So what do we have here? We have arousal versus performance, which is inverse risk. And how do we define risk? Probability of crash. Right? That's the ultimate risk. So you crash, you do something, maybe your car. But so we could have gone only for crashes, but we thought that we should form a pyramid. So we had the crashes at the top of this pyramid, and we had the citation. What's the purpose of citation? Basically, citation. Presumably, because proposal is may end up in a crash. People, state tries to educate. And of course, at the bottom of the pyramid is also propensity for acceleration, which is a well-known indicator of risk, which insurance companies, as you know, take into account with this new methods. monitor you and so forth. So that's why we build the pyramid of risk. Of course, the crash is the ultimate thing that we are concerned about, but traffic citations and acceleration inclination were put as bottom layers in this pyramid. And there was a hypothesis in our part that one layer may fit the other, right? And okay, I mean, that was one thing. And if you find direct relations between these three layers, you're at the top of your game. But we also figured out that things may not be so clean cut. So we thought that there may be some hidden factors that indirectly associate these layers with other things. And what are these other things? We thought that may have to do with individual characteristics of drivers, with distractions, and we all know that texting while driving and so forth is going to be a major like it's something that usually is not taken into account based on the risks. So that's why we call this comprehensive driver survey, because it has a very expansive view of the pyramidal concept, and also has a very expansive view of underlying factors with respect to this pyramid that has never been put together in such a way before, the best of partners. And just to complete the picture, atop of all these custom questionnaires, we added actually two standardized psychometric questionnaires, the state and trait anxiety inventory, and the big five personality inventory.
Could I interrupt? Can I have him change the microphone, switch it to that one instead of these? So it just picks you up a little bit stronger.
Yes.
Thank you. For everybody online, we're just going to try and switch the microphone to the podium mic instead of the room mic. If we can't do the switch, then Ioannis will have to talk louder or maybe out underneath that or something.
Yeah, it's picking you up very clearly, Mike. So I think it might just be room placement.
Oh, it's muted, that's why.
That's for your computer or laptop right here. So if you turn that on, it'll
So they're working on that. I will say so as I typed in the chat box, arousal is essentially driver stress. And when you're under stressed, like if you think of a basketball player who goes on court and they're just not really amped up, they're probably going to miss more shots. If they're way over aroused,
Disable this thing so
they'll probably miss shots as well. There's too much stress, performance goes down.
Now both mics are muted.
Hello?
Okay, now we're good. Thank you. We can hear.
Okay, so now let's visit one by one the components of this questionnaire as I presented them a few minutes ago. So there are three underlying components, if you remember. One is the main thing that we are after, which is driver risk. So there were questions about the driver's record. That's from where we estimate risk, right? If they had any crashes in their records, if they had any traffic citation the last 3 years, I think, and if they enjoy acceleration or not. The next section had to do with the driver's profile, and that included a bunch of questions about their driving habits, if they like driving in the first place, if they commute or they don't commute, and things like that. And then the last two sections, one was the driver distraction section. That's a typical questionnaire that is distributed when somebody tries to survey risk. But the driver distraction section in our case was much more expansive. Usually these questionnaires focus on texting and driving. If you see here in this summary of the questions that we were posing, it was a much more expansive concept. For example, we wanted to find out if they drive often and being absent-minded, which is also a form of distraction, esoteric distraction. We found that this is very harmful in prior research that we did again with Mike and the group here on the simulator. If people are upset when they drive, these are questions usually they are not posed. And as you will see, they play a big role. That's what the models show later on. Even drinking coffee when you drive is a form of distraction. I know that people don't think about it this way, but one of your hands is not on the wheel for some time. So we covered everything, basically, everything you can think when you think of distractions in a very expansive way. And the last section, if you remember, had to do with driver effect. That is totally neglected, unfortunately, in driving risk questionnaires, and has to do with how comfortable people are with respect to certain driving situations, like, for example, driving at night or driving in rainy weather, and so forth. And you will see, surprisingly, that a very big portion of the population, based on our sampling, they are not comfortable at all with things that you may consider are rudimentary in some cases. So let me, before I go to the models of the survey responses, let me give you an overall picture of how the responses were shaping up in terms of descriptive statistics. First of all, let me repeat the number. That was 1,223 respondents from the state of Texas. The sample was relatively balanced, about 60% female, close to 40% male. A couple of interesting things. 18% of the sample did not like driving. I remember this because it will come up later on in the analysis. Texting and driving, we all know that is quite widespread. And indeed, 63% of the people in the sample were texting and driving, which is the great majority of the population. Something that is not well known, and we captured this thanks to the unique design of this survey, almost an equal percentage of people drive often while they're upset, which, as you will see, is not a good thing. And 42% do not feel comfortable driving at night. This is almost half of the population. And we have to drive at night a lot of times. So, and okay, interesting, in the state of Texas, now the headquarters of Tesla, almost half of the population says that they will never let an automated vehicle drive for them. Okay, that was a set of fun parts, but let's go now to something a little bit more serious, which is modeling this data, right? And what's the ultimate purpose? I expressed this in the very beginning, is to model risk. And we, on the survey side, we modeled risk pyramidally, right? Crashes at the top, which is the main thing that we care about, but also things that may eventually lead you to crashes, which are the bottom layers of the pyramid. How are you doing in terms of traffic citations? And what is your profile when it comes to acceleration? If your acceleration crazy, so to speak, or acceleration of this. All right, therefore, these are the response variables from these multi regressional models, and the factors, the predicting factors on the other side of the models were all these groups of things that we thought that may play a role, starting with distractions, including affect for the first time perhaps, personal characteristics, and so on. So let's see now what these models gave us as a result. First of all, the acceleration model. What predicts acceleration based on all the other things that we collected in the survey? And you will see here some things are in bold. The things that are in bold are so because they come again and again across all the layers of the pyramid. So here is the acceleration layer of the risk, which is at the bottom of the risk pyramid. These things that are in bold, that means that the same thing come in the other layers. It's not only that they predict acceleration, they predict the other layers too. When there is a yellow highlight, that means it indicates direct association between the layers. When it's just bold without the highlight, these are indirect associations through those predicting factors like affect and distractions and so forth. So what do we have here? The usual suspects, male, gender. They like acceleration very much. They drive often while being upset. And of course, they get traffic citation. When we examine the middle layer of the risk pyramid, traffic citation, again, we see that right in bold, male, same. Text and drive, of course. Drive while being upset. You remember the upset that many people ignore, they shouldn't, because it appears to be as strong of a predicting factor as the texting and driving. And of course, the radius acceleration, which means direct relationship now between the layers, right? The citation directly relates with the risk level beyond it. So people who release acceleration get a lot of tickets. That's the bottom line. That's what this highlight says. It's out of the bank. All other things are taken into account because this is a very sophisticated model that analyzes the data. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, the crashes, again, male gender, you see it's across the entire pyramid. Gender is very important as a predictor. Texting and driving, again, the same thing. Across the layers, and driving, right, being upset. You remember that thing that is usually ignored, it should not be ignored. It's up there with texting and driving when it comes to predicting risk. Okay, so you can see now here in a graphical way how are things shaping up after this data collection and analysis. So what do we know? We had a hypothesis that these layers of risk may be directly associated. And we found out that at least two of these layers, traffic citation and acceleration inclination, they are directly associated in a very significant way. What we also found is that two other layers of this pyramid, the traffic citations and the crashes, they are not directly associated, but they indirectly associate with the same triple of factors. Male gender, texting and driving while being absent. All these factors very strongly predict both traffic citation records as well as crashing. Now, that's what the big study showed us in terms of questionnaire. Now, what did the naturalistic study show us and how actually it was designed? By the way, just to compare the numbers, in the naturalistic study, we followed 57 subjects, again, from across the state of Texas, not 1,223, the survey number. So you see the disparity in the numbers. But we followed them for 1 week, day and night, 24/7 for 1 week. Okay. So these are the differences in terms of observations and temporal density. How did we manage to do this across the state of Texas, even for 57 subjects with a relatively modest budget? We did what we call a ubiquitous study. So this is not the first naturalistic study, but usually in naturalistic studies, at least so far, people were installing things in the subjects' cars and so forth. A very heavy approach. Here we installed nothing. We gave almost nothing. The instruments were the people's mobile devices, their own smartphones and their own smartwatches. The only thing we sent them was an OBD device to get the card data, and that happened like 2 years ago. If we were doing today, we wouldn't send them even this, because now we can take everything from CarPlay if they can. But yeah, I mean, and then through the smartphone, we were sending also the questionnaires using mobile Qualtrics coding. So yeah, pretty much basically it was a hands-free naturalistic study. We were just collecting the data through the cloud for the most part. And that's why we were able to afford a very thorough naturalistic study with relatively few people and relatively minimal expense. By the way, as you will see, that was not the only innovation in this study. We also collected things that no other naturalistic study collected, like matching weather data, matching traffic data. And we managed to do this by application programming interface calls in open sources. Very importantly, we also collected data not only when people drive, but the rest of the time when they don't drive. And that gave us tremendous insights because it allowed us to figure out which things are due to driving and which things have nothing to do with driving, something that we wouldn't know. And we thought that driving is the responsible factor if we have not done this. Here it shows the 3 groups of variables that we were collecting in this naturalistic study. The green group is basically car data, and we were getting this through the OBD device, one thing that insurance companies used to give them to snap under your steering wheel. The second group of variables, human sensing, physiology like heart rate and so forth. We did not have cameras, but we did not need to because we can get what we need mostly, what we need through the smartwatch and the acceleration sensors of the smartwatch and so forth. If you have an Apple Watch, You may notice the picture that figures out how much you wash your hands. If you do it for 20 seconds. And it's quite scary. That's why we did not follow people. We were following their hands only when they were at the car. Because we do not want to know what they do with their hands when they were not at the car. But then the blue group of things has to do actually with what we did in the last survey questionnaires. We were asking the same questions. Only in this case, in addition to the question data, we were getting all these other sensory data that they described.
So Ioannis, can I
Yeah.
jump in? So I just
Sure.
want to emphasize the data collection methods, and this is important, particularly maybe like Emily, but also for like other groups at TTI, like Michael Martin, et cetera, who are pulling together different databases, right? So if you go just back one slide, so this was a really unique study. So we not only collected data about how the vehicle was behaving through the OBD2 port, that data was collected off the OBD2 device, sent to the phone, and then that data was sent back to essentially
To the cloud.
home base, a cloud.
Yes.
So we get information about what's going on with the vehicle. We get information about physiology from the smartwatch, basically your Apple Watch, right? That does biometrics. That too is sent back to home base. So that gives us an idea of driver stress. The important thing there is we were collecting driver stress data while they were not driving and while they were driving. So we have a really sound way to differentiate when somebody is stressed relative to themselves, not just this bigger notion of increased stress. And then lastly, and this is important for other groups like Katie or anybody who does survey work or has to reach out to participants, the psychometrics, all the questionnaires, the anxiety questionnaire that we have up there, the NASA TLX, trait, state, anxiety, Big Five, those are all administered through the smartphone. And we have different protocols for when they have to fill those out, morning or evening or in the middle of the day, and they were all administered according to that schedule, delivered via the smartphone. They filled it out on the phone and then hit send and complete, and bam, it went back to home base, right? So this whole process, I mean, it took a lot to set up. It was a lot of time. Laura and others, I mean, Kim, Kathy, I mean, they put a lot of time into making this happen. But once it was doing its thing, it did it really, really well. And I suspect that this is one of the most comprehensive studies integrating different data sources kind of around human physiology that's ever been done in the US. So anyway, I just want to make that note because I want researchers to understand the connections to their work and how they
Sure.
might apply that.
No, absolutely, Mike. Thank you very much, actually. And you can see here the comparison of our study. We could call it NUBI for naturalistic ubiquitous study with other well-known studies. This is Harmony. This is the closest that it is to our study. Actually, it was done by Virginia. And they also used smart watches, but they had this specific smartwatch that they were sending it to the subject. So that's a major difference between them and us. And they also had the camera that they were asking people to install in their cars. They were sending them this too. We did away with this too. You know, people don't have cameras in their cars that look at them. So that was done with one idea in mind: how once this research hopefully is successful, how can immediately basically become a feature in driving across the nation and the world. So, and we figure that whatever we can capture with computer vision, we can capture it through the hand motion of the smartwatch if we have the right algorithms, and we kind of do. And the other thing they have the cameras is to monitor the traffic. Why? I mean, you have now the HERE API. You see all the modern cars, as you move, they emit your coordinates to who knows where, but somehow it makes them to these companies like here and so forth. And that's why you show your navigator very accurate predictions of traffic density everywhere. So this is from where we were getting our traffic density information. Why? Because we knew the GPS of the car and the time. And then we were making a call to the API. And we were getting this information about traffic density around the car at every point in time. So what do you need computer vision? They serve this in your plane, you know what I mean? So, and the weather, of course, and so forth. So you see, we are collecting things that nobody else nobody was collecting non-driving habits, not even Virginia. And that's very important. Because if you don't have this information, you arrive at wrong conclusions with respect to where arousal is coming from, as you will see in a moment. Other studies, the famous SHRP study that was done with thousands of drivers, very heavy design. They had to install things on cars and so forth, very big budget. And you see they collected only a subset of what we were collecting. Primarily things related to the vehicle variables, nothing about the humans, nothing about psychometric. By the way, psychometric, nobody is thinking of collecting psychometrics. If you don't know the kind of person you are dealing with, in my view, everything else should be taken with a grain of salt. Okay, now that shows you from where Kim and Laura and the rest were recruiting people pretty much all over Central and East Texas. Only one spot in the West Texas. But I would say, since Texas is 3 times the size of France, that's quite an extent, right? So we were targeting young adults in between 20 and 30. The reason is we wanted to neutralize the physiology factor, because you have to take into account health and so forth. So if you get data from people in their 60s, that's a totally different group. And in order to figure out the arousal there, you need to have substantial sampling. So we wanted to minimize that sampling. So we thought of everything to do a really proper study. All right, so these were commuters, so people that were driving every day. It was not, and they had experience, although they were young, they had more than 4 years of driving experience. So whatever you see here later on about arousal, which is instantaneous stress, it's not because these people did not have any experience or they were driving once per year. These were very experienced drivers, young but experienced. Okay, so we wanted to neutralize that factor as well. And here you see the analysis level because we have sensory data now. So the total data set has over 1 million rows because this is multimodal. Like you have more than one variable you collect. You have heart rate, you have car speed, this and that. That's why it's rows. At 1 second you have this heart rate, this speed, this hand motion, this. That's what the row of information is. Over 1 million rows of such information on the second line. Okay. Look how many rows we have of non-driving from the same people, about 10. So this is a lot more because obviously you don't drive most of your day, right? So this is a unique naturalistic study because most of your data is from non-driving times, as it should be, because you need to take into account the context. Of course, this is information that is good for deep learning, which I will not present today, but we have been doing this and maybe next year. But initially we did statistical model because we wanted to find the overall data on average. So you need to condense this information, and we did this at the minute level. So that comes to about 15,000 minute level rows, and then about 150,000 minute level non-driving rows. Again, it's 1 to 10. That's the ratio between driving and non-driving data. In order to compute arousal, one of the things that you need to do is to know the baseline of every human being here in this study every day. Because every day your baseline changes a little. Well, because we are good, but not very good, initially, we did not collect the resting heart rate that the Apple Watch provides every day. We figured this out towards the end of the study, and we had to amend the protocol and collect the resting heart rate only for the last 12 subjects. So what we had to do is basically go back and for the remaining 33 subjects, I think, or for the remaining 45 subjects, because we had 57 in total. So for 45, we had to guess. And we developed a statistical model, basically, that very accurately, we believe, because we tested it on the ground truth, figures out the resting heart rate of every human being in this study every moment, every day. And we managed to save the situation. So with that, we were able basically to estimate true arousal, individual arousal for every human being every day during this time. And here you see, before I go to the models and end my talk, you see a descriptive visualization of what is in our data. For example, you will see, by the way, there is a publication in the IEEE Transactions on Effective Computing, which was about the pilot study of this research, the first 21 subjects. Because that was the idea. We do the pilot, we do not know if this thing would be successful. If it's successful, then we move on and we complete the study. If it's not successful, sadly, we wrap up and go. Thankfully, it was successful, and that part was published. Not whatever I present today, which is the full study, which probably will be published a little later. But there you can see some of these things in their initial form. One of the things that you see is that the data are very representative. This is the jump factor. This is actually how much traffic is around you. Okay? And 0 means there is no traffic, and 10 means there is traffic so much. It's basically a bottleneck, so you stop. It's stop traffic jam. Okay, and you see we have data across the board, which means we have data about all possible situations, which is good. But you see also the good thing in living in Texas, most of the data are from situations where traffic flows. Okay? That may not be the case in Los Angeles or something. Regarding, for example, heartbeats, you have all the way from 50 heartbeats per minute is very low heart rate, probably marathon runners, all the way to 150. But maybe you need to go to the hospital at this point, unless you are running out somewhere. And so forth. Yeah, let's move on. The models now. 3 models. Driving, what was happening when they were driving, what was happening when they were not driving, because we wanted to see if the things that were contributing to driving arousal were coming straight out of driving situations, or they were common also during non-driving periods. That's the purpose of this. And then we ran a 3rd model, overspeeding. We did not intend to run this model in the beginning. We thought about running this model after we saw the results in the first 2 models. Overspeeding is basically consistently driving way above the speed limit. And how do we figure this out in the data? From the HERE API, we know at each point on the road they go. We know not only the traffic jam factor, we also know what is called free flow. Practically speaking, what is free flow? It's basically something a little bit above the speed limit. I can explain how it is. computed through the right questions. Now, what did the driving model show? It shows that arousal during driving is primarily driven by anxiety predisposition and high speed in dense traffic. When you're on the highway, you go like 75 miles per hour, or so the limit is 65, and there are many cars along you go at the same speed. So this is a situation basically because of the speed and because of the fact that other little rockets going parallel with you, you need to be aroused, or the mistakes may cost them. This is the non-driving model. So what this model was showing that arousal, or actually a high heart rate, it's not arousal in this case, you will see why, is predicted by afternoon and by weekdays. So afternoon and weekdays, either you drive or you don't drive, you have higher heart rate, all other things being equal. And the same thing was coming during the driving model, right? So if we did not have the non-driving model, we would think that afternoons and weekdays uniquely contribute to driving arousal, but this is not the case. This happens even when you don't drive during these two time periods, and I can explain later on in the questions. And you see, because you have high speed in dense traffic as a predictor of the driving arousal, that's why we thought of introducing a new model, the overspeeding model, to study this factor a little more in depth. Because I think we need to wrap up here. Let me show you the picture that shows everything, so to speak. This is what the naturalistic study showed, right? So on the left side here, you see what the sensing variables showed in the models. Hyperarousal, which is another word for stress, was predicted by hand motion, which was primarily associated with texting while driving. So it was not only the questionnaires that we were capturing this, now we were capturing this objectively using the sensors of the naturalistic study. Anxiety predisposition. Anxious people, when they drive, they have much more stress than non-anxious people, no matter what the situation. Hyperarousal is also driven by high speeds in high traffic situations. The example I gave you, highway at 75 miles per hour, and other cars like 1 feet away from you running at the same speed. That creates a lot of arousal. And on the questionnaire side for the naturalistic subjects, you see acceleration inclination with male gender is associated, traffic citations with upset and drive. You remember this from the large scale survey, but it's only a subset, right? So the same things were coming up, but not in full glory, only a subset of it. Why? Because we don't have the numbers. And that's the beauty of the twin studies. You don't have the numbers on the naturalistic study, but we have it on the large scale survey. So you see here, what is the white stuff? It's from the naturalistic study. What do you see? It's basically a subset of what we found in the big study, in the big survey study. So where you have the white stuff inside the orange stuff is where the naturalistic and the big survey agree. Where you don't have white stuff is we have not found significance yet in the naturalistic study, but this is probably because we don't have the numbers. But that allows you to be an oracle. It allows you to predict what will happen when the naturalistic study goes from 57 to 1,000 something. Okay. And what's the bottom line of all this? The bottom line is that we started documenting in non-certain terms that hyperarousal, which is basically one axis of the Yerkes-Dodson law, can be measured instantaneously with ubiquitous means and is associated with your texting habits when you drive, with the fact that you're overspeeding or not. High speeds generate a lot of arousal, and your anxiety predisposition. And all these things are associated with driving risk, either directly or indirectly. Therefore, we established links through these pathways with arousal and driving risk, which driving risk is the inverse of performance, is one axis, the vertical axis on the Yerkes-Dodson law, and this one is the horizontal axis. So through this process, we can estimate basically driving risk through hyperarousal, not once, but every moment. Why? Because we can measure this every moment through its predictors. And that allows us actually to change that discussion when it comes to risk estimation in transportation. And if we can estimate at every point in time a risk in such an informed way, not only if you move out of your lane and the new car detects that it's your lane, but looking actually into your psychic and into long-term patterns and so forth, and do this then basically in your console, just as a self-awareness measure, at every point in time, you can have a quite accurate estimate of your risk. And that alone could be a huge intervention, but it could be even better if we develop more interventions along the way, which, by the way, can be delivered through the same means that we collect data, which is your smartphone and your smartwatch. Thank you.
Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. I didn't see any in the chat window, but if anybody who's online, if you want to unmute yourself, let us know your question. I guess while we're waiting for that, one question. So we have groups here at TTI that do work with pedestrians, like Neil Johnson does a lot in that area. We do work with bikes. Actually, Neil does a lot of work with bicyclists as well. We are getting into the area of employer type safety programs and really kind of branching out quite a bit. So the question I have is, the immediate question is, how easily adaptable is the kind of the baseline technology and the baseline approach outlined here to these other populations?
Yeah, very good question, Mike. In my view, is very easily adaptable because you can use the same data collection means, which is the smartphone and the smartwatch. And you can also use the same means as an intervention once you figure out what is going on. And the intervention may be as simple as making the person aware. Much like, for example, your smartwatch tells you that you are sitting too much, right? And prompts you to go to take a walk around the office. And it could be as simple as this. Now, regarding pedestrians, yeah, again, as hopefully it was clear from my presentation for driving, two things are important: to be comprehensive and to have control. In an experiment, it's easy to have control, you can program. In a naturalistic study, it's not. That's why, for example, in driving, we were getting also non-driving. That was our control. Okay? In the case of pedestrians, you don't monitor people only when they walk, when you monitor them when they don't walk, or whatever else they do. So if you follow these two principles, then before start thinking how to intervene, try to understand the deeper phenomenon, and then start thinking how to intervene, you will do very well.
Yeah.
And one example here is, for example, the upset and drive. That's, as you see, a very important factor here in the driving risk. If we did not have this, we would have missed 1/3 of the factors that allow you to complete the cycle.
I could see that for pedestrians. So I would imagine like a busy urban area, pedestrians are under high stress because there's lots of traffic, lots of pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters. They're probably going to make more mistakes, whether it's perceptual errors or behavioral errors. Maybe they're stepping out into the crosswalk too early or something like that. But we can begin to measure their levels of stress via these pretty straightforward, simple measures. So.
Absolutely. And once you understand the phenomenon, then you will know exactly. For example, in the case of the driving, you see an important factor. What basically spikes arousal on average to most people is you drive at high speed with a lot of other cars driving at high speed next to you. Okay. And you see there are a lot of other things like anxiety predisposition and so forth. There are also secondary things like weather, which I did not put them here because they exist, but especially in Texas, it's not always. So, but the model takes all these things into account. And if it finds that, for example, one day you are emotionally upset, you see the factor there, the weather is bad and so forth, immediately the instantaneous risk per the model will go up. So what do you do in this case? But you have to drive, and you have to go to work. In this case, to reduce the risk, if you could have now an AI agent that will help you, is guide you not through the freeway where you will go 75 miles per hour with a bunch of other little rockets next to you, but may guide you through quieter streets, because that alone will start reducing your hyperarousal and you will reduce your risk. In a normal day, that would not be a problem, because I mean it's a zero-sum game, right? So you have to subtract from somewhere. So now that we understand how this thing works, you see, I can discuss with you on the fly effective intervention. But in my view, the error many people do is before they even understand the phenomenon, they start planning interventions in their head, which may be totally wrong.
So thank you again, Ioannis. One of the next steps that we have is Ioannis and I have been thinking through how to present this to like NHTSA, federal highways, particularly NHTSA because they're more driver centric, right? Vehicle centric. Federal highways is environment, but we're looking at how we can convey this information to them to pique their curiosity and hopefully get some money from them. So like NHTSA, they're concerned about stress and anxiety for drivers in response to the vehicle and the design of the vehicle. Federal Highways is interested in driver responses, stress, et cetera, in response to infrastructure design. And those two areas are kind of merging together and fusing, but we think that there are some funding opportunities with those two organizations. So I know we've run a little bit long. I want to thank everybody for their patience. I want to thank everybody online for your patience. I just want to ask real quick if there are any other remaining, if anybody online has any questions, please do just go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in.
So, Ioannis, I have a quick question. So, I participated crash investigations a long time ago. It's about the collision between the airplane to the vehicle on the ground. So the drivers of the vehicles had less sleep before the 2 days, before the accidents. So this kind of a sleep, insufficient sleep can affect the level of stress or arousal, right?
Correct.
So using the Apple Watch, so I guess we can measure how many hours the participant had sleep before the driving.
Right, actually, that's an excellent question, and we figured this out, but unfortunately, kind of late in the study, and Kim and Laura are here. So when we started collecting for the last 12 subjects, when we started collecting the resting heart rate, we also started recording what was happening during their sleep. Because up to that point, we were recording everything throughout the day up to the time that they were sleeping. And we have data for 12 subjects throughout their sleep period as well. We have not analyzed this data, but in a future study, I totally agree with you. The observational horizon should also incorporate sleep. And thanks to new batteries and so forth, you can go with the new smartwatches for 2 days without even charging. So, I mean, things are getting better and better at an astronomical pace. If I were done this study now, this is like a 2-year-old study. It's not like an old study. I would have done things totally different.
Awesome. Questions?
I just have one other, you were talking about some of the public agencies, federal agencies that might have a use for this data. Something that you said, Ioannis, about, like being able to notify the driver. That sounds like something to me that I wonder if GPS navigation companies like, Google Maps, Apple Maps would have any interest in that, because I mean, they already give you the option for, hey, do you want to switch your route to avoid this traffic jam that we've detected? It seems like there'd be a place for it. Hey, we've noticed that your anxiety seems to be spiking. Would you like to, get routed through, have the calm route option?
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's something that they would have any interest in.
Right, that's the idea that I discussed a couple of minutes earlier, right? And
Another sponsor is, I was just thinking FMCSA, this kind of direction that Eva and Emily have been going in for the last several years. I mean, they're interested, this request for information that they recently posted and we responded to, they were asking about driver behavior and stuff. And this could be something that would fit in very well with that. So. Awesome.
But last point, I mean, happenstance is very important in everything in life. And I just wanted, as I remind myself how this thing started, we wanted to do something with Mike and Robert, and it was the pandemic. And if it were not the pandemic, it might be that I would have never thought of designing such a ubiquitous study, because we wanted to control everything through our house. wherever those houses were. And you see, it's at some point we would have thought of this, but we thought this so early because we were going through some difficult times during the pandemic. Thank you, pandemic.
All right, thank you, everybody online. I appreciate it. Emily, thank you for recording this, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.